When people talk about moving abroad, the conversation usually starts with the same magic word: salary. Which country pays the most? Where can you earn more? Where can you finally feel financially secure? And on paper, the answers seem obvious. Switzerland, Luxembourg, Norway, Denmark, the Netherlands, maybe Germany, maybe Ireland, maybe the UK if you survive London without selling part of your soul to your landlord. But the truth is, this is where many relocation fantasies quietly fall apart. Because the highest salary is not always the best deal. And the richest country is not always the smartest move. A country can pay you very well and still leave you feeling like your entire life is one long-standing order to your bank, your landlord, your health insurer, and the guy who sold you a coffee for €6 and somehow made you feel grateful for it. So today, I want to look at Europe from a more useful angle. Not just where salaries are high, but where salary and real living costs still make sense together. Because that's the difference between admiration and strategy. And honestly, this topic is personal for me. My long-term dream is not just to chase the biggest paycheck. I naturally look towards something closer to the sea, with slower mornings, better air, and ideally, a vineyard somewhere in the picture. That's more my type of fantasy than fluorescent office lighting in a €2,400 studio apartment with great transport links. But that doesn't mean high-salary countries are irrelevant. Not at all. Sometimes, those countries are exactly what help you build the first serious layer of financial stability. So this video is not only about where to move forever. It's also about where to move smart. Some countries are for building capital. Some are for living better. And some, if you're lucky, give you a bit of both. The real question is not, how much can I earn? The real question is, how much will still feel like mine at the end of the month? Because if one country pays you €6,000, but rent, daily costs, insurance, and general breathing expenses swallow almost everything, then congratulations, you are highly compensated and still slightly annoyed all the time. Meanwhile, another country may pay you less, but leave you with more flexibility, more stability, and more actual life. That's the lens I want to use here. Not fantasy, not brochure language, not relocation tourism. Just this: income versus drag. And by drag, I mean everything that quietly drains your money and energy. Rent, groceries, transport, taxes, housing shortages, and the hidden category nobody mentions enough: the cost of staying sane. Top countries that actually balance salary and life. Let's get to the core of it. If we look at Europe not just as a list of salaries, but as a list of places where a skilled expat can still build a workable life, there are a few countries that stand out. Not all of them are the absolute highest paying. That's the point. The goal is not to find the most impressive number. The goal is to find the strongest balance. So here's the practical top tier. Switzerland, the outlier. Let's start with Switzerland, because if we don't, someone in the comments will act like we ignored the Alp-shaped elephant in the room. Switzerland is still the monster in the room when it comes to salary power. The numbers are huge. If you're in finance, pharmaceuticals, engineering, healthcare, or certain specialized technical roles, Switzerland can feel like Europe on cheat mode. Even after high living costs, it still often leaves more money on the table than almost anywhere else. That's why it belongs in this conversation. But here's the catch. Switzerland is less a lifestyle bargain and more a precision instrument. It works extremely well if you already have a strong offer, you fit a high skill profile, and you're ready for a system that is efficient, expensive, and not especially interested in romanticizing your arrival. This is not move here and figure it out. This is arrive already useful. Housing is expensive. Everyday costs are expensive. And if you're not earning at the level Switzerland expects, the country stops looking like a financial paradise and starts looking like a luxury store where you accidentally walked in to buy chewing gum. Still, if the question is pure salary power balanced against real costs, Switzerland is hard to ignore. It may not be the most emotionally inviting choice for every expat, but it is one of the strongest financial positions in Europe. Think of Switzerland as less dream destination and more capital acceleration zone. If your plan is to stack savings fast, build security, and maybe fund a softer next chapter somewhere else later, Switzerland makes a lot of sense. The Netherlands. Strong, but tight. The Netherlands is one of the more interesting cases because it combines several things that expats care about. Strong salaries, international companies, good English accessibility, strong infrastructure, and a generally modern, functional environment. If you're in tech, logistics, finance, operations, design, or engineering, the Netherlands stays very relevant. The problem is housing. Housing doesn't just hurt there. Housing actively interrupts the fantasy. Amsterdam especially can destroy the attractive part of a good salary very quickly. So the Netherlands is a good example of a country where the balance exists, but only if you play it intelligently. If you insist on the most obvious, most in-demand, most international city, you may end up with a strong income and weak margin. But if you look at the country more strategically, secondary cities and nearby areas can improve the equation a lot. That's the key lesson here. The country may be strong. The city may be the trap. And that's true in more than one place on this list. The Netherlands is not cheap life. It's efficient life. If you fit the labor market and avoid the most painful housing choices, it can absolutely work. But it's not a relaxed bargain. It's a structured trade. Germany, the reliable machine. Germany is less flashy, but it may be one of the most solid answers in the whole conversation. Because Germany rarely tries to seduce you with glamour. It just keeps standing there like a very organized spreadsheet with public transport. And for many expats, that's actually a compliment. Germany works because it offers a combination that matters in real life. Decent to strong salaries, a huge economy, broad job demand, strong industrial and technical sectors, and more geographic variety than people sometimes remember. Berlin, Munich, Hamburg, Cologne, Stuttgart, Leipzig, smaller cities, regional centers. The country gives you options. That matters a lot. Because expat success often improves the moment you stop chasing the most Instagrammed city and start choosing the city where the economics actually work. Germany may not always give you the highest disposable income on paper after taxes, and taxes are not exactly shy there. But what Germany gives you is structure, predictability, a feeling that if you do the work, the system can hold together. That's huge, especially for people moving with long-term intentions rather than short-term fantasies. Germany is not romantic. It is usable. And in the relocation world, usable beats sexy more often than people admit. Austria, quietly strong. Austria is one of the more underrated answers in this discussion. It doesn't dominate headlines the way Switzerland does. It doesn't have the giant corporate aura of Germany. It doesn't sell itself as aggressively as the Netherlands. But Austria can be a very smart middle ground. Vienna is one of those cities that people often idealize for good reason. It is clean, structured, culturally rich, and generally very strong in quality of life conversations. And compared to some of Europe's more brutal capital city housing situations, Austria can still feel relatively sane. Not cheap, no, but sane. That matters. Austria also fits a certain personality type very well. If you want order, safety, public services, and a relatively polished daily life, it has strong appeal. Its weak point is that language matters. This is not one of those countries where a lot of people can just glide forever on English outside certain sectors and social bubbles. But if you're willing to integrate, Austria becomes much more interesting than it often looks from a distance. Financially, it may not dominate the whole continent, but in terms of balance, it performs surprisingly well. Especially if your idea of success is not only saving money, but living in a place that actually feels stable and pleasant. Norway and Denmark. High quality, heavy price tag. Now let's talk about Norway and Denmark. These countries are often grouped into the high salary, high quality of life category, and that's fair. But they also belong to the you will absolutely pay for this quality category. These are countries where the systems are strong. The services are good. The infrastructure is modern. The social safety net is respected. But your wallet notices everything. And I mean everything. Buying lunch can feel like a small business decision. Going out for drinks can feel like applying for a microloan. So yes, salaries are strong. But so is the drag. These countries make the most sense for people who value stability, order, and welfare state strength enough to accept the higher daily cost environment. They are rarely cheap, smart picks. They are more like premium functioning societies. If your profession matches their labor demand and your lifestyle fits the culture, they can be excellent. But if you're chasing pure margin, they may not beat more strategic alternatives. They are great places to live for the right person, but not automatic financial hacks. Ireland, strong salary, brutal housing. Ireland is fascinating because in many ways, it looks like a dream expat setup. English speaking. Strong presence of big international employers. Good salaries in tech, pharma, finance, and specialized roles. Relatively clear demand in certain sectors. But then housing walks in and throws a chair at the whole conversation. Dublin especially is where salary optimism goes to have a tense conversation with rent. And that's the issue. Ireland can absolutely work, but it often works better on paper than on apartment search websites. If you land a very strong job, it can still be worth it. If you already have a clear route in, it can still be powerful. But Ireland is a perfect reminder that one of the biggest questions in relocation is no longer just, can I get hired? It's, can I live somewhere reasonable after I get hired? That matters now more than ever. A high salary is great. A high salary while desperately refreshing rental listings is less cinematic. The UK, good income city trap. The UK still belongs in the conversation because the labor market is big, the salary potential can be strong, and English obviously lowers one huge barrier for many people. But the UK is also one of the clearest examples of why country-level analysis can mislead you. Because the UK and London are not the same financial reality. Not even close. London can swallow money at a speed that deserves a wildlife documentary. The moment people hear strong UK salaries, many of them are really imagining London. And London is often where the equation becomes much uglier. Outside London, the picture improves. In other cities, the balance can become much more workable. That's why country choice is often only half the decision. City choice is the other half. Sometimes the bigger half. The UK is not a useless option by any means. But it's not a place where salary alone tells the story. You have to look at where, not just what. Spain and Portugal. Lower salary, better life logic. Now we get into the part of Europe that usually makes the most emotional sense to people who are not obsessed with maximizing gross income. Spain and Portugal are not the winners if you rank only salary. That's obvious. But they become extremely powerful once you ask a different question. What if my goal is not just to earn more, but to build a life I actually want to stay in? That is where these countries change category. For local salaries alone, the picture is more modest. No magic there. But for remote workers, entrepreneurs, consultants, people building international income, or people who already accumulated savings elsewhere, Spain and Portugal become almost a different species of answer. Because the lifestyle upside is very real. Climate matters. Walkability matters. Food culture matters. The psychological effect of daily life matters. And this is where I'll be honest again. This is closer to my own internal map. If I imagine where I want life to drift over time, it is much easier for me to picture the sea, vineyards, and slower energy than endless gray salary optimization. That doesn't make Spain or Portugal automatically the best. It means they become the best in a different phase. And that phase matters. Some countries are good for accumulation. Some are good for arrival, the smarter strategy. So if we're being honest, maybe the real answer is not one country. Maybe the real answer is sequence. That's where things get interesting. Because the smartest expat path may not be pick the best country and stay there forever. It may be choose one country to earn, another to stabilize, and another to live. That's a much more strategic way to think. Maybe Switzerland is not your forever place. Maybe it's your wealth-building phase. Maybe Germany or Austria is your structured middle phase. And maybe Spain, Portugal, or Italy becomes the place where life actually opens up. That is a far more realistic model than pretending one destination solves every variable. And honestly, once you start thinking like that, relocation becomes less emotional chaos and more design. What I'd actually watch for. If I were ranking countries for expats based on real salary-to-life balance, not fantasy, I would watch for 5 things. First, net income after tax, not just the shiny gross number. Second, housing pressure, because rent ruins more dreams than bureaucracy. Third, whether the city is distorting the country. This happens constantly. Fourth, how easy it is to function in English at first, even if language learning still matters later. And fifth, whether the place fits your real stage of life. That last one matters more than people think. Because a country can be objectively strong and still wrong for you. If your dream is peace, space, sea, and something rooted like a vineyard, then pure salary rankings only help for one chapter. Not the whole book. Final thought. So where do high salaries and real living costs actually balance best in Europe? If we are talking about strong salary power with real structure, countries like Switzerland, Germany, Austria, and the Netherlands stay very strong, each with their own warning label. If we're talking about where life starts making more emotional and long-term sense, especially once you have savings or remote income, then Spain, Portugal, and parts of Italy become much more compelling than raw salary rankings would suggest. And that really is the whole point. The best country is not always the one that pays the most. It's the one that matches your stage, your strategy, and the life you actually want. For some people, that's a higher paycheck and a colder system. For others, it's less money and more sky. For me, if I'm honest, I'll probably keep looking a little closer to the sea, a little closer to the vineyard dream. But nobody said we can't first study the countries where money still works hard before we decide where life should slow down. If you also want to rethink where and how to build your next chapter, subscribe to the channel. Because sometimes changing countries is not really about relocation. It's about changing the shape of your future. Until next time, arrivederci, amici. And here's my question for you. Would you spend 5 years in a high-salary country you don't love if it could buy you the life you actually want somewhere else?